Skateboarding at this day and age doesn't seem like a very suitable career path. The industry's down there in the dumps with the surf industry as well.
It's right there with photography.
And photography gets slumped in too. It's like we're all got thrown at the bottom of the barrel again, you know?
I'm Justin J, and this is The Plug. Whether it's a social media bio or an introduction to a stranger at a party, self-identity in today's world is often reduced to a singular label tied to what we do for a living. We define ourselves by career accomplishments, and breaking free from the inertia of self-perception can be daunting. It's been said that there are no second acts in American life, yet as challenging as it may seem, self-reinvention is possible. Today's guest embodies this idea. As a teenager, he took a leap of faith and moved to the US with virtually no English skills. Through a mix of unwavering determination and immense natural talent, he won Thrasher's Skater of the Year in 2001 and became one of the most respected skateboarders of his era. But the industry is filled with skaters who are unable to find new career paths once the toll of gravity and concrete catches up with their bodies. So drawing on the same fearless determination that defined his skateboarding, he chose to pivot and embrace his passion for photography. With perseverance and a sharp eye, he successfully transitioned from a career in skateboarding to accomplished professional photographer. So how is capturing an extraordinary moment with a camera similar to landing a challenging trick on a skateboard? We'll find out as we sit down for a chat with the man behind Bike Path, a stunning new book of photographs documenting the community and the culture of Hawaii's North Shore. Today, skateboarder, surfer, photographer, and proud North Shore resident, Mr. Arto Saari. Arto, thanks for sitting down, man. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks for having me, Justin.
I want to jump right in. Let's get the plug in right away. Bike Path, a beautiful new photography book you just released. Is it available online? Where can people get it?
That's available at superlabo.com. It's a Japanese fine art photo book publisher. So it's available on their website. I don't know how many copies are left. It's actually been doing pretty good, and I think we're pretty low.
That's a good problem to have.
Pretty low on stock. So if anyone wants it, hit him up now.
Right on.
Yeah, it's going pretty fast.
Well, congratulations, man. It's a really beautiful book. I'm glad I had a chance to check it out. So, you and I, we hung recently in New York City at a book signing for Bike Path. And, the line for people to stand in line and get their book signed was so long, and it was moving so slow. And I think the main reason for that is that you seem to have a really genuine desire to chat with people and to have like a real moment with them as you were signing their book. And, you're a really personable guy. And it struck me as really interesting because, when you were a teenager and you first got an opportunity to get on Flip, you moved to Finland and had like almost zero English skills. And, at this point in my life, like it would have to be a spectacular opportunity for me to move somewhere where I didn't have the ability to speak to people, And I'm just wondering, what was that like for you when you were a teenager? I mean, was that incredibly isolating? Was the prospect of being a professional skateboarder, did that outweigh like some of the pain that you might have had of not being able to communicate? Or was just the common language of skateboarding something that made it bearable?
I mean, it's definitely the common language of skateboarding, and I was so young and I didn't really even, tell you the truth, think about it. I just wanted to ride a skateboard and I wanted to be in sunshine. So it's just that kind of outweighed all the other problems that it might have presented. But the first 3 years of moving to America were definitely pretty tough. Or more, first 2 years. I feel like it took me about 2 years to learn the language and be fluent enough where I wasn't kind of scared to have a conversation with people or scared to mess up some words or whatever. So it was just like the communicating for the first 2 years was basically just through skateboarding. which is probably better off that way. It's like, you don't have time to bullshit around or chit chat, or you just don't know what's going on. You're just like, hey, give me the next spot. Let's handle business. Let's go.
Would you say, do you have a general knack for language? I feel like a lot of Europeans are so much more adept to that. I mean, us Americans, like we don't generally have to learn another language, and we tend to not do that. I mean, my language skills are garbage. Is that something that you were naturally born with because of being from Finland?
No, I mean, I definitely wasn't naturally born with. I mean, I studied pretty hard when I was a kid. I mean, I didn't stay in school for that long, but in Finland, straight away when you go to school, you have three languages straight off the bat. You got Finnish, Swedish, and English. And those are mandatory languages you have to learn. So you're kind of getting introduced to this other world. Like, hey, Finnish is just, a couple million people, or whatever, 5 million people speak that. It's like there's a whole world out there, and you guys need to learn other languages. So it's kind of instilled you and as a kid. So you get a small introduction, but you're not learning how to speak English in a school setting, 3 hours a week, learning some words. I mean, I could read and write a little bit, so I had a little bit of a vocabulary, but I couldn't pronounce stuff, or I couldn't speak it, or when people throw slang words in there, how fast people are talking. Like, our English teachers didn't really speak English, you know what I mean? But we had the books. So you do get introduced to that early on. So there's a little spark there. And obviously, luckily in Scandinavia, none of the music, none of the movies, none of the Western media is translated or dubbed. So we get all original versions with subtitles.
So you have a little bit of an ear for it.
When you're watching movies and everything, so at least you know what that language sounds like. You have, there's a soft introduction to it. But generally people, yes, in Europe, there's so many different languages, and people are just accustomed to like, hey, you go across the border, you're going to have to learn another language.
Yeah. As Americans don't have to do that, and we don't.
Well, and the thing is, like, English has become the worldwide international language. Now, so many people speak English that you almost don't need to learn another language. So it's like kind of it backfires a little bit. You know what I mean? You really have to want to learn another language because you can almost get by with English in so many places.
Well, one of the themes that has come up so often with skateboarders that we've had on the show, whether it's Paul Rodriguez or Leo Fitzpatrick or Alex Corcoran, is the sense of community that skateboarding represented for them. And, in their own separate ways, they all kind of talked about how it really didn't matter whether someone was Black or white or Latino or female. I mean, it really came down to, are you cool to hang out with, and can you skate well? And generally speaking, if you answered yes to those questions, there was some place for you and you could find a sense of belonging. I mean, did you find that generally to be your experience? Even as a relative outsider, being young, being European, not knowing the language. I mean, did you find that sense of belonging and community in skateboarding?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I started skateboarding in the 90s, early 90s. And back then, you can still walk down the street and you see, when you look at someone's shoes and you look at the way they're worn and you're like, hey, how's it going? Like, you just knew that they skated, and you can strike up a conversation there and then, like just by looking at someone's shoes, like, okay, he skates goofy. He does a lot of kick flips, like, or maybe he likes heel flips or whatever. Like he's got, an ollie hole on his shoe or whatever. Like you could kind of tell a little bit about the person by just looking at his shoes. And back then there's very few skateboarders. So I feel like the community was even stronger, different places you went. And skateboarding is one of those things that, like you said, yeah, it doesn't look at your race. It doesn't look at your age. It doesn't look at your social caste. It doesn't look any of that. If you show up at the skate park, you could be just a beginner, first time on a skateboard, or a little toddler, or there could be some people that are close to retirement age learning how to cruise around or carve around, and everything in between. I mean, it's pretty rad skateboarding got to that place where that particular activity brings people together from so many different walks of life, and they can all kind of cruise together.
It's funny. I mean, do you see the contrast living in Hawaii? Hawaiians generally, if you're respectful, tend to be wonderful people. But in broad strokes, Surfers generally aren't like that. If you see like 20 people showing up into the lineup, like, oh, awesome, more people to make friends with. There's a finite amount of waves and people are very territorial and like they're not open to new people in the way that it seems like skateboarding is.
Oh yeah, I mean, people's on sand personality and in the water personality are sometimes quite different.
Do you get that in a skate park though, or no?
No, not the same way. No way. I mean, I think it's I don't know, I'd like to say that it's the scarcity of waves or whatever that people just tend to really get more selfish and asshole-ish, if you will. So
Yeah.
it's a different, it's funny. I always trip out on that. It's such a different playing field. Skaters generally tend to be more chill about it. But then again, when you're filming video parts and you finding spots and this and that, like when you get to that level, there's a little bit of that in skateboarding too. It's like you just went and filmed 5 tricks in these spots that are not really blown out. Like you're kind of keeping those undercover until the mat comes out, your video part comes out, and then you're just kind of like, yeah, whatever. Like I remember like looking for spots and different things, and you're just kind of trying to outdo yourself, but at the same time, it's a career, so you kind of have to stay up with the group and maybe do some better than some other people are doing. So there's in professional skateboarding, there's a little bit of that too, but not quite as blatantly visible as in surfing is. Like, hey, this is my wave, I'm going. But it's also like the skate spot's always there. When the wave comes, you gotta be there and you gotta be ready to go. And that's kind of the difference between it too. Like you go and skateboard, you can take your time, you can warm up to a spot, you can decide whether you want to skate it that day or not. There's no thinking. Like once the wave's firing and it's there and it's the biggest wave of the day, like you don't get to choose really like or think about it anymore. It's like if you want it, you better just go. You're going no regardless. Yeah, you have to commit. So there's a different kind of commitment that's pushed on you through surfing, which I like, whether you're ready for it or not, you're just like, well, you better go and find out.
Yeah. I want to get your insights on how important it is for a skateboarder to be on a particular team and the significance of that association. Because like a major career arc for you was being plucked out of relative obscurity and put on Flip. And you rode for them for a while and then you left and then you came back. And, professional athletes in other sports, they change sponsors and they change teams all the time. But I get the sense that with skateboarding, it's something a little bit deeper. And, the way that a skate team is so heavily curated, the style of the riders and how those riders are projected and portrayed, whether it's their video parts, the music, the ads, their graphics, like it's all very intentional and critical to the brand of that skate brand. And it's almost more analogous to a record label than it is to other traditional sports like baseball or basketball. And I'm just wondering, when you first went on to Flip, like what does that represent to a skater, both professionally and in terms of identity, to be on a particular team? And what did that mean to you?
I mean, at the time when I got on Flip, I mean, they had just come to America in like 94, 95, and Tom Penny had been on his path of destruction. And obviously Rune was killing Bert and Rowley and Andy Scott. So it was a very small star-studded team that just came out of nowhere and just made themselves known. So at the time, Flip was one of those things like, holy shit, like there's only whatever 4 guys on the team, but they're gnarly, and then Ali came in later. There's a few AMs. So it was very well curated, very different skateboarders who all made an impact. And at the time, getting invited to be on that roster was obviously a big deal. And so it wasn't watered down in any way. It was such a tight machine. And back in the day, those companies were the core of the business and core of what was going on. So your board sponsor kind of dictated what shoe sponsor you're going to get, what clothing sponsor you're going to get, what shop sponsor, what trunk sponsor. The cool, if you say, comes from the board company and kind of defines your other sponsors. And board companies used to have a lot more power because, skate industry was small and they were kind of in charge. And then the tables got flipped and it's like, okay, well, who's got the cash? Shoe, clothing, energy drinks. So now it's like, well, now we control the market. But what board brand you ride for still kind of defines what those other sponsors are. So they still kind of have a hand in the game for sure.
So monetarily, the skate brands don't necessarily drive the market because there's energy drinks and apparel and all these other sectors. But in terms of like cachet that can make a rider, it's still as important as it ever was?
Yeah, it still affects your kind of personality and your brand as a skater for sure. Not as much. I feel like that's getting watered down a little bit too now because it's just there's so many brands, and every skateboard manufacturer is basically just been trying to stay alive for the last decade or whatever. So financially, they don't matter whatsoever.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, because I know when I first started shooting my project on the North Shore, probably around 2010, 11, I think it might have been like the beginning of the end for the surf industry. You know, print media was dying. I watched the downfall of the industry in terms of the money pouring into it. But I'm just wondering, like, what's the state of skateboarding now? I mean, is it on a similar path as surfing? Is there a lot more money in skateboarding now than 15, 20 years ago? Like, what's the state of the industry for like a young skater kind of who maybe wants to have the path of what you were able to accomplish?
Not a good career choice. It's down in the dumps with the surf industry. It's the same. Skateboarding at this day and age doesn't seem like a very suitable career path. The industry's down there in the dumps with the surf industry as well.
It's right there with photography.
And photography gets slumped in too. It's like we're all got thrown at the bottom of the barrel again. You know, it feels like the early '90s where there's like really no money in skateboarding. Everyone's kind of struggling just to go out and create content and film video parts. I mean, no one even films video parts anymore. There's no time and money and effort to put into it. It's like it's better to film Instagram clips and whatever. It's like you don't get these bodies of work from skaters that we used to, that kind of define their careers. And
it's just like an instant stream of little disposable crumbs instead on social media.
Yeah. And I feel like the quality and like what is okay to post now is like whatever. I'm like, I would not put that in my video part 20 years ago. Like, why is it on the web now?
You know, it seems like skateboarding, you know, like so many sports, it's not something that you can physically sustain at an elite level past a certain age. And you've been really successful at being able to lean into your passion as a photographer, and you live on the North Shore. But I would imagine that you have a lot of people that you came up with who maybe weren't as successful in kind of forging a second act for themselves. And, you know, other than maybe starting a brand or being a commentator, I mean, what is a traditional path after a professional skateboarder career starts to wind down?
Well, the traditional path for a skateboarder to wind down is not pretty. like any major. I mean, there's a lot of bad paths you can take out of it after living such a life. So there's a lot of danger there too. But I mean, some people, it seems like skateboarders tend to be drawn to the more creative pathways of life. And those are not usually the easiest because it takes a lot of time to build that second career, whether you're a photography or a graphic designer, starting a company, or someone like Max Shaft building motorcycles. Like it takes years to kind of put that similar kind of effort into another path. And then, you know, there's obviously a lot of drugs and alcohol you can get mixed up with it. That seems like the standard pathway. It's just like people just kind of drink themselves useless after skateboarding. It's just like there's a lot of people not able to turn that off. So there's definitely quite a bit of that too. And then some people just be like, I'm cool. I'm going to go get a regular job. You know, it's like I had a great friend who he was actually on Flip back in the day, and he came to California. He could have been a professional skateboarder. He would come out and skate with us and beat us in game of skate and everything. And he was just like, you know what? I'll just work in the warehouse and I'll enjoy skateboarding. I never want to make that my job. He loved skateboarding so much that he purely wanted to keep it fun for himself, and he didn't want to make it a job. So, but he could have just had it all. So shout out to Luke McCurdy, and He's still skating. He's still incredible. I just saw him post a clip and I was just like, wow, he's still going. And just ripping. There's all kinds of skateboarders, you know?
I'm curious about your relationship with pain. You have had some extraordinary injuries over the course of your career, and you always chose to get back on a skateboard. Is there some connection to that pain that's maybe addictive or even pleasurable in some bizarre way? I mean, because you think of all the drugs and alcohol and how pervasive that is that you just mentioned within the skate community, especially back when you were first coming up.
Yeah.
Did you get the sense that those drugs and that alcohol were a response to numb the pain of being injured, or was it really just an alternate form of self-abuse?
I mean, it's a pretty high adrenaline sport, and whether you're up or down, alcohol usually comes into it. So, well, I mean, whether things are shitty or you're partying or whatever, it's there. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
yes, some days it's definitely to numb the pain too. When you feel like you just got hit by a bus, it's like, oh, let me just get numb here for a second. But obviously, we all know that that is a very short-lived path, and that, I mean, I feel like alcohol is the big daddy of all of them. That's like causes most destruction than any other drug.
I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is, I mean, if you could choose to theoretically learn all of the tricks and accomplish what you had without the pain, would that be an obvious choice? Or is there something kind of like perversely addictive about pain being a part of skateboarding?
Yeah, I don't know if I was ever a big fan of the pain part. I think I was just able to kind of just get past it. I just love skateboarding so much that kind of just made you deal with the pain. I don't know if I was ever into it, or maybe I was. Or maybe I'm just trying to lie to myself. I don't know. maybe I'm just trying to.
I mean, obviously, maybe it's not intentional, but you obviously have a high tolerance for it. I mean, I'm old fashioned.
Yeah.
Call me old fashioned. I don't like pain. Like I don't have that in me.
No, I think I do like a little bit of pain for sure. Yeah, I think so. Maybe I'm just trying to tell myself something else. But no, it does make you feel alive for sure. I mean, and now I get that same kick out of going surfing when it's a little bit bigger here, or going diving. I started diving a couple summers ago, and that is a complete opposite act of skateboarding.
How so?
Well, skateboarding is just so physical, and surfing like high energy. You're pumped up. It's just like the excitement level is up there. And in diving, it's also extremely dangerous. The matter of life and death can be within inches of the surface. But you have to, in order to be a good diver, you have to be as calm as possible and have as much oxygen in your body. So it's like it's the ultimate form of meditation, but there is still that, I guess, that pain and the danger part to it that kind of lurks around. That
the threat.
There's a serious threat. I mean, most divers die, they die within few feet of surface. You know what I mean? They don't die on the bottom or pass out. It's like usually within few feet of surface when they come up. So if you just stay down a little too long. And I seem to get really addicted to that in the last few summers. So maybe I do love the pain on some level. Now just in a different form.
Cool. Well, it's funny. I think a lot of people look towards organized team sports for their kids to instill a sense of dedication and sacrifice and collaboration. And it seems like skateboarding is really the opposite of that in many ways. I mean, there's no, you have to sit on the bench for this game, or there's no like take one for the team, or there's no I in team, or, any of that bullshit that a lot of kids kind of rebel against and gravitate towards skateboarding because of. But, that said, the self-discipline involved into throwing yourself down a kink rail 50 times in order to nail a trick, like that can't be understated. I mean, there's value in that, and there's life lessons in that. I mean, what is it about skateboarding that's most important that you think that people outside of the culture don't recognize the importance of?
I don't know if people really realize how hard it is and how much effort you have to put into it before you can even start enjoying the activity. Like you got to put in a couple of years of serious activity. Like you better put in 10,000 hours off the bat before you can even start remotely enjoying skateboarding, I feel like. And that's where a lot of people fall off of it, and they're just kind of like, oh, this hurts too much. And I meet so many people that are like, oh yeah, I quit skating when I was 15, 16. I was like, oh, that's when I just started I was just getting started, you know? But the pain part is definitely a big kind of deterrent. And it does teach you certain kind of, you become a very persistent person because learning tricks, it takes a while. Everything's going wrong. I mean, even professional skateboarders, I was on the ground 90% of the time. It's still like you can't get away with it. Eventually, the concrete gets you every time, but there's few moments of glory. So it does teach you certain tools in life and mental persistence to go after things. And I think that's why a lot of skateboarders go into creative tasks and they kind of just take that same structure and the same vibe they attack skateboarding with, and then they just go and do something else, and they usually do shine at it,
So I want to switch gears. I want to talk about the North Shore for a second. And now, so, I know you put out this book, Bike Path. It's beautiful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I published a kind of similar project a couple years ago. I spent 10 years shooting on the North Shore. And, you said something really interesting when we were hanging out in New York a couple weeks ago. And you were talking about how the majority of the portraits and the majority of the photos in your book were really within the last 2 to 3 years, even though you'd been shooting much longer, because it took you that long to really get the access and to, be able to have permission to shoot these people that you were really most interested in. And I can relate so much to that, because the North Shore is it's a unique place where somebody like yourself who shows up with a very accomplished skateboarding career under their belt, but that status doesn't necessarily transfer directly to the North Shore. I mean, you show up and you still have to put in your time and you still have to earn your trust. You still have to show your respect to get your respect. And I'm wondering, was there ever any moments when you first started shooting over there where you were kind of surprised or maybe even humbled by just how much of an outsider you were viewed as? And what was your approach to changing that?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I was kind of aware of the situation already without knowing anything about North Shore, but coming from skateboarding has very similar rules. It's a very tight-knit community. The way skaters work, like you show up to a spot, you don't just kind of rock up and shoot everything, and you can't just barge someone's session and just go shoot a picture. So there's sort of a certain kind of onset rules in skateboarding that you kind of have to go by if you want to break into it. And I kind of took that same approach and method, like, hey, I'm from this world. Like, the surf world doesn't seem that much different. It has different variations of it, and I'm from a small town myself, and I tried to respect people's private space, but at the same time, you have to go make pictures, and street photography style is what I like to do. So I like to catch people on the moment without not really asking, like, can I shoot your picture or not? It's like, I'll go shoot a picture and then I'll beg for forgiveness afterwards. But I kind of had that in the back of my mind the whole time. And I was treading lightly and just kind of slowly getting introduced to the community. And in the beginning, it'd be just like, oh, this is a skater guy making pictures, skater guy. And then my pictures kind of started seeping out there. People started seeing my work, and it just kind of started spreading. And as I'm treading lightly, it just kind of all falls into place. So I never had any like super gnarly experiences of shooting or whatever. But yeah, I feel like I also just kind of went pretty slow with it. I was like, okay, now I know these people, I know what they're doing. And just kind of like, I kind of figure out how the North Shore goes around. And
yeah.
And I kind of fell into place from there.
It's a really unique place, and it's a kind of one of the few places where wealth and celebrity like don't immediately buy you access. And it's a meritocracy, whether that merit is surfing or taking amazing photos or whatever it is. Like they really want you to tread lightly and show some respect, and you'll eventually get it back in spades.
Yeah. And I feel like that, whether it's portrait photography or commercial or whatever, it's like in order to make great pictures, you have to have a connection with the people. It's like I shot the same thing over and over and over again, like so many things, but eventually I feel like I created a connection with some of the people, and they finally kind of let their guard down. And that's when those great pictures came in. And I had a feeling of it. It's like, hey, I'm just going to shoot I'm probably going to shoot just a bunch of blanks for a few years, whatever. Like I'm going to get to the gist of it and try to get that guard down and because I'm genuinely interested in these people and I love the community and this is the style of photography I like to do. So I'm just like, hey, I'm just going to see if this works. But doing documentarian work, you have to earn the trust of the people. And sometimes that takes a long time.
Did you have an ambassador? Did you have a couple of key people that unlocked some doors for you? Or like, who did you know when you first moved there?
I know my buddy Tippy, who's a skater. And obviously I knew Nathan Fletcher and Benji Weatherly. Benji wasn't around that much, but Nathan's here. I mean, Nathan's introduced me to a bunch of people and Ross Williams has tried to kill me a few times at the Bay and stuff. I think he really enjoys taking someone out when they don't know how to surf. And it's like, hey, it's 20 feet today. You want to go surf? Yeah. I'm like, no. It's like, we're going. I'm like, oh, great. I mean, I think Ross and Nathan were probably some of the first people that I knew over here. And then obviously going chicken surf, kids going to Sunset Elementary. Like I'm on the bike path 10, 15 times a day. And that's kind of what made me start shooting these pictures in the first place. Cause I wasn't shooting very many photos when I first got to Hawaii. I was telling you the truth. I was kind of burned out and I was over it. And I didn't shoot any pictures in a few years. I thought I was done. And I started seeing these everyday life moments on the path. And I'm like, this is kind of cool. Like, this is cool what's happening here. I kind of love this stuff. And I don't know why I started shooting those pictures. Maybe just try to make myself feel like I was useful while I'm riding the bike back and forth a million times.
I found that some of those smaller moments, like on the bike paths, that can be much more evocative and tell more about the North Shore than another picture of like the hot new surfer getting barreled at pipe. You know, like there's so many people doing that and it's so obvious, you know, and the quiet moments on the bike path, like you can learn a lot about the culture by that more as opposed to the surf photos. That's what I found.
Yeah, for sure. And it's an interesting mix because there's obviously there's a lot of great local surfers, all the family surf. Everyone who lives on the North Shore is somehow related to surfing, whether it's on a professional level or not. But it's an interesting mix because you get this like whole industry and professional side of things, but then you also get all these people that just love the ocean and love surfing. And it's just, I kind of all mixes together. So yeah, I'm always been interested in street photography and portraiture and stuff like that. And yes, you're right. You know, a photo on the path can sometimes tell more about the culture and the vibe that and another picture of a barrel. I mean, we know that there's plenty of that, and there's plenty of guys that do it really great,
very well.
Yeah,
I kind of didn't want to step on those toes because I didn't have anything to contribute that could top that, you know.
Yeah, and me too. It's like I can't swim 10-foot pipe and get right in the pocket and shoot a photo. Like I wish I could, but I can't. I mean, and I think that's one of the biggest differences to skate and surf photography. Like if you're a really gnarly surf photographer, you got to be able to survive in really serious conditions to be part of the session. Like if you're with a fisheye or wide angle at chopu barrel or pipe barrel, like not just anyone can do that. You have to be extremely fit and know the ocean, or you're just a Barney shooting on the beach like me. I'm like, okay, give me a long lens. I'll sit here in the shade and just cruise. You know what I mean? So I have a mad amount of respect for those guys that can do that.
Likewise.
Because obviously skateboarding, anyone can go sit at the bottom of a 20-stair handrail and shoot a picture. There's no like physical demand to be part of the session. So I think that's one of those like interesting differences in skateboarding photography and surf photography. Like, I mean, usually the surf photographers are as gnarly as the people they're shooting, you know?
For sure. You know, so the North Shore it's nicknamed the country. And, you know, compared to Honolulu, it's still fairly isolated and relatively remote. But, you know, it's certainly not as insular and lawless and raw as it once was. And, you know, even during the 12 years that I was shooting over there, I noticed a lot of changes in the culture for various reasons, whether it's social media or real estate prices or the change in the tour where Pipeline is not this culminating event in December anymore like it once was. But, you know, that said, in each in our own way, I think our books really represent a really unique, specific slice of North Shore culture that may not look the same moving forward. And I'm wondering, like, what are some of the biggest changes that you noticed in the time since you've been shooting? And what are some of the things that you're most proud to have documented and preserved in photos?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Oh yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, I don't know. You're right. I feel like North Shore is definitely a lot less lawless than it was back in the day. And I mean, obviously, we're all heard stories. And I started coming here in our early 2000s on skate trips, and we'd come here and skate the park or cholos or be in town. So I got a little taste for it, but I never really quite grasped on like what North Shore was about or what it is. I think it's mellowed out in a lot of ways for sure.
Yeah.
Listening to the old stories and what goes on these days, and but it still gets real up there. At the pipe still has a pecking order
For sure.
I mean, I don't know. Is it changed that much? I mean,
When we had Benji Weatherly on the show, and one of the things he talked about is when he was young, it was intimidating. There was a hierarchy, and it's not necessarily like that anymore. I mean, don't get it twisted. If you show up from Cookville
yeah,
and drop in on the wrong guy, you're still
yeah,
going to get lit up.
yeah,
But in an age of social media, you can't just choke people out on the sand in front of pipe and expect there to not be consequences, And even when I first showed up, there was this real sense that like, okay, these are the rules. These are the people. Here are the places that you aren't allowed. And, when I eventually earned access to shoot those people or earned access into those backyards or those patios or whatever, like it just made this experience so much more rewarding, and it made those pictures so much more powerful in them,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think rightfully so. People are a little protective. I mean, Hawaii has a big history, and a lot of people come here and just take, and they don't necessarily give a lot back. Like when you meet real Hawaiians and you experience real aloha from them, it's like it's a serious thing, and you're like, oh, this is what it's about. This is how you take care of each other. And I've met some people over here where I'm just like, oh yeah, you truly represent the aloha spirit. Like, you're the guy, one of them being Chuck Sutherland. It's just like the guy's amazing. And he's in and out of the water. He's just like the raddest human being. And I feel like, and my buddy Chance, like there's just few people that kind of represent that vibe. I feel like with surfing and the history that the islands have and the tourism that people come here and people move in and out, the place is very transient.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's why it also takes a lot. You have to be here at least 3-4 years before people start taking you seriously, because they don't know if you're just going to bail or whatever. Most people last about 2 to 3 years and they move off the islands and they're done. Things just move a little slower here. You have to kind of earn your place. You have to earn your respect. And once people let you in, like, okay, this guy's vetted and this guy's cool, and like, you kind of start being part of the community and being part of it. So
that's why I was asking about, who your kind of ambassadors were when you first moved there. Because something about, at least for me, an introduction from somebody important like goes a very long way on the North Shore. It's almost like it's a very closed circle in the sense that you're an outsider until somebody vouches for you, and then it's a very small circle.
yeah,
I would show up every year with a box full of prints and give images to people that I'd shot the year before. Sometimes, candid, they didn't even know that I took it, but just giving someone a physical print out of the blue, like that goes a long way. It's showing respect instead of asking for something. I felt good giving something,
Yeah. I feel like you have to also, I have to give back. And I'd be kind of doing the same thing. I'd be making prints and giving people prints, and I just kind of, and I just love printed matter. I feel like the photograph's not done until it's printed. Like, you have to have it out other than on your phone.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's always, I got a great shot of you. And then they show you the back of their camera or their phone. It's like nobody physically touches photographs anymore,
Right.
And when you give someone, it's a big deal. It's rare.
That actually has helped me quite huge too. It's just making prints and be like, here, check out this cool shot I got of you, and just hand it out, and people seem to love it. Yeah. I mean, that kind of stuff goes a long way. And then, it's just the way you are. And, I try to be part of the community, whichever I can. Like, if there's a fundraiser for the art class at at the schools or whatever. Like I tried to be part of it. I tried to donate art, try to be part of the little things that the community puts on and, make myself useful. And once people take note of that and stuff, it's like, okay, he gets it. He's part of this thing. And, everyone kind of works together. Then all of a sudden you're in there. It doesn't matter which
Doors
community.
open. Yeah.
Doors open. And I think that goes anywhere in life, any community you go into, you know what I mean? I try to give back whichever way I can, and a lot of times that's through photography.
So, the development of surfing and skateboarding as a culture and as a sport, it's been so intertwined over the years. I mean, if you look at somebody like a surfer like Larry Bertelman, so heavily influenced like some of the Dogtown skaters in the late 70s. And then you cut to today and you see some of these kids doing these like above the lip tricks on surfboards. They're so obviously influenced by modern day skateboarding, so there's a lot of cross-pollination that goes on. But I also get the sense that the two cultures almost exist in a kind of parallel but separate universe. And there's not actually as much crossover between the two cultures as somebody might expect. And, you've been really inside both of those core scenes as both an athlete and as a photographer. I mean, do you agree with that statement? And what are some of the biggest differences that stuck out between surfers and skaters?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, skateboarding came from surfing because of the lack of waves. So people started drilling wheels, roller skates onto 2x4s and bombing hills and finding empty pools. And I think the pools were a really pivotal part of why skateboarding started to really become of its own thing. So I feel like for years, skateboarding was just a byproduct of surfing. But for years, especially after the pools, it started to grow into its own thing. And I feel like the cultures kind of clashed and skateboarding wanted to be its own thing. And we're not part of surfing. So it kind of just like kept going away and just like, no, this is our world. You guys are here and whatever. Like it was this, early days, like being a street skater in my time, like, really, definitely didn't mention if you surfed or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like in that circle. But now I feel like it's gone completely other way, and a lot of skaters start surfing and surfers start skating, and it's just kind of, I feel like and even with the tricks and stuff, like a lot of obviously all the early skate tricks are influenced by surfing. Like there's a trick called Bertelman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's all the old school first tricks, they all tried to mimic surfing in pools. And that's where that came from. And obviously skateboarding became its own thing. And a lot of the airs and flip tricks and all this got finessed in skateboarding. And now skateboarding is feeding all those airs and all the modern technicalities back into surfing. So it's kind of an interesting mix where it's like where it came from. And a lot of it got invented in skating. And now, people like John, and they're just getting so good. They're like, I can do that on a surfboard on this wave, off this ramp.
In terms of like a mindset or attributes, do you notice there's like a theme that's different between surfers and skaters?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, we're all chasing the froth one way or the other. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you just do it in a different way.
We had Damon Way on the podcast, and he made a very controversial statement that he thinks that skaters are way cooler than surfers, at least with respect to personal style. Thoughts on that?
Yeah.
You care to tread into that?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like skateboarders are definitely more city people. It takes place in a city. Your landscape is an urban city, so I feel like you're more connected to the arts and culture and the street fashion, and you're clicked in on the city culture. Surfing happens most of the time in very remote places on the earth, or unless you live in a beach community. And beach communities have a certain style and vibe and whatever. So I feel like whether it's cooler or not, yeah, I'm not going to start getting too controversial.
I'll let Damon take the brunt of that one.
Yeah, let Damon take the heat on that. But I mean, I see where it's coming from,
Yeah.
I feel like surfers tend to be removed from what's going on in the world, and skateboarders are more clicked in because their waves are right. in the city center.
That makes sense.
You're just more connected to what's going on in the cities. You know what I mean? Like and surfers are all around the world, remote places, or in different beach communities, and just kind of, sprinkled around. So, I mean, obviously that already affects the cultures and different things, what's happening there. Yeah.
So, with skateboarding, obviously natural talent and practice play a huge part in, being able to pull off tricks and stuff. But at some point, there must just be this leap of faith that you have to have when you're attempting a huge rail for the first time, and a skateboarding skill set doesn't necessarily transfer directly onto a wave in surfing. And so, with that said, I'm wondering, was there a moment when you first started surfing on the North Shore where your blind determination got you maybe into a dangerous situation in the water? I mean, I heard Ross took you out surfing Waimea for the first time and you'd only been surfing for a year or two. I mean, does your natural, like, just blind determination, has that ever came back to bite you?
Luckily I didn't drown that day, and it took me 3.5 hours to get a wave. That was definitely blind determination. I was so tired. At one point I just wanted to go in. I was like, I didn't want to be out here anymore. It's done. And then Ross is just like, paddle, go deeper, keep your head down. So I just basically just kept my forehead on the board and just paddled until I felt the pickup. And I think I airdropped into the wave a little bit and somehow
stuck it.
Somehow made it. Yeah. I mean, it felt like bumming a San Francisco hill on the loosest trucks you could possibly have on a skateboard. Just like it definitely felt like the most wild ride, but also semi-addicting. The early years when I got here, I was definitely learning how to surf and pushing it a little bit more, and just like not knowing the ocean and not really understanding the dangers of it. Maybe like looking back at it now that I know more, I think I'm more scared of it now because I kind of understand a little better. I think it was just like, I'm like, sure, I'll paddle out there. It's water. How bad can it be?
You see a lot of that in Hawaii because there's such a big military community over there, and you see these people show up with little or no surfing experience, but they're badass dudes, and they're like, oh, I could fucking fight the ocean. I'm going to just brawn my way into this. And it's like, it does not work like that.
Yeah, you just can't. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you have to know the wave. You have to know the currents. You can't fight it. As soon as you start fighting it, like you're out of energy. Like, you have to really, you got to pick your moments and go with the flow. It's like when you're in heavy surf like that, it's just like you really have to calculate kind of every move. So it's a pretty interesting activity.
What's your current relationship with skating as opposed to surfing? Do they still represent the same things to you at this point in your life that they did?
Yeah, I can't let skateboarding get in the way of my surf career now. so I don't skate anymore at all. I mean, I barely can roll around a park. My knees are so shot that it's too much pain, and whatever little bit of I have left in my knees, I kind of want to save it for surfing, and I enjoy being in the water. And it's, and even surfing on a bumpy day and whatever, it's just like one wrong move and you're like, oh, you're kind of limping for a few days.
Does shooting skateboarding kind of allow you to still have a leg in that world and feel connected with it? Is that important to you?
I think there's three things that relieve the pain of not being able to ride a skateboard physically the way I would still want to ride a skateboard. And that's obviously doing photography, shooting skating, shooting surfing. Like, yes, you're part of the action and you're doing something, and sometimes getting the right photo almost feels like you're also completing a trick. So there's a very similar kind of reward scenario happening in your brain. And then obviously the act of surfing. So I feel like, surfing and photography combined makes me able to deal with the pain of not being able to ride a surfboard.
Nice. Well put.
If that makes sense. Yeah,
absolutely.
It took years to be able to kind of, it didn't happen overnight. It took years to kind of like, okay, I knew my days were numbered, and it was just kind of this slow burn out where I'm just like, what am I going to do? And then, photography slowly started replacing it, and then surfing came in, and now I feel good about it.
Amazing. Well, we always like to end the podcast by asking a guest to plug something that they're not directly involved with, but that they feel isn't getting enough attention. And it could be a book, a movie, an artist, a surfer, a photographer, a social cause. Is there something that you've been into lately that you want to shout out and give a little attention to?
I mean, one of the great things. I mean, I just came back from Copenhagen Open, and I think it's one of the, if not the only, rad skate contest left. You know what I mean? It's just super grassroots, and it feels like that old energy when you first started skateboarding and the community, and it's like a skateboard festival. It doesn't really have anything with a contest, even though there's some competitive parts to it. But I feel like it's like one of the only events left in skateboarding where it's like true, raw, and real on the streets. You know, and it just
were
gives
you
you
over
that.
there shooting? Or as an ambassador? Or what was it?
I was out there shooting. I've been shooting. I mean, I used to partake in the event, and I've been kind of documenting that event since 2013. Pretty much gone every year. There's a COVID year, maybe another year I missed, but it's like I've been shooting that event for 10 years now. What those guys are doing and how they throw the event, I just feel like it comes back to that kind of reason why people started skateboarding in the first place. It kind of gives you that feeling, you know. There's rules, but not really, and it's all kind of just comes together, and they leave a lot of room for magic, but it's just like, and it takes place in a city, so it's really good to photograph. It's not in an arena, it's not closed off. The spectators can participate, and it's just, I don't know, it's just, to me, it represents like why we started skateboarding in the first place. So, and you know, I mean, I think, you know, they get quite a bit of attention, but yeah, if you ever have a chance to check out or get on that train, I definitely highly recommend it.
Cool. Well, dude, I really appreciate you taking the time out to chat. And I'm going to give you one more shout out. Check out Bike Path. Tell me the publisher's name again, where they can buy it.
Superlabo.com.
That's a beautiful book. So congratulations on that. But also just like, it's really impressive that you able to kind of find a second path that really means something to you after skateboarding. And, you know, not everyone's able to do that. So I'm happy for you. It sounds like you really landed in a very cool place over there.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. I'm kind of mind blown myself, but because Hawaii was definitely never in the cards for me, because I was like, I'm a skateboarder, I'm a photographer, I'm in LA, this is my world, I'm in this. And then when surfing came along, it was kind of like, oh shit, and now that's all up in the air. I'm like, babe, let's go, let's move to Hawaii and try to make it happen. And it felt like that. It was kind of scary in the same way when I first came from Finland to America, where you just kind of jump into the unknown with no solid career path. You don't really know anyone in the North Shore, nothing, and you kind of have to build everything from scratch. But
yeah, it's that leap of faith we were talking about before.
Yeah, I definitely like that. I've had that feeling twice in my life, and like coming from Finland to America was once, and then moving over here was definitely like the other one. You know? Amazing.
Well, hopefully our paths will cross. Maybe in the lineup, we'll split the peak together someday. And
come on over, dude. The season's knocking on the door. Looking forward to seeing you over here.
Great talking to you again, man.
Cool. Thank you, Justin.
Cheers.
Ciao.
Thanks for listening, and a huge thanks to today's guest for dropping in. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a favor and take a minute to rate, review, follow, or subscribe. This episode of The Plug contains original theme music by Andrew Van Weingarten and Dan Drohan. Mixing and sound design by Matt Boynton at Ultraviolet Audio, logo and branding by Italic at italic-studio.com, and you can check out my photography at justinj.com. Thanks again, and be sure to check out the archive and tune in for future conversations.